All right. So let's go on. So I think from some of your discussions, what we see is that, a lot of our kids sometimes they are just coping. They are just dealing with the situation, whether it's because of routines that they must have. If something unexpected happens, they have difficulty handling that. So these are the challenges that they face. And this is when, emotions can feel so big. So even when they have skills and their skills are getting better and they're doing a lot better, um, it doesn't mean that regulation will automatically get better as well. Because if we've only worked on skills, but we have not worked on regulation, doesn't mean that they're going to be able to pick it up. And when we talk about regulation, I know a lot of kids have been told, oh, do deep breathing, do deep breathing. But the thing is, learning how to breathe in a regulated manner is not as easy as people seem to think. A lot of kids actually struggle to breathe in that way. Not just kids, even adults. In the past, when I did in-person workshops with some teachers, and we worked on breathing and regulation. What we actually found was that a lot of the adults also struggled with breathing. They didn't know how to breathe in a regulated, deep regulated manner. So if you tell a child just breathe, what you will usually find is the kind of breathing, which actually doesn't help with regulation. So we cannot assume that just because a kid is smart, a kid is bright, a kid is capable, that regulation will automatically happen. It won't. Okay. So we have to then work out and figure out, okay, how are we going to help our kids manage the stress? How are we going to help our kids with regulating their emotions? And how that starts is it starts with co-regulation. It starts where they are able to co-regulate with us, then that's what will help them build their self-regulation as well, which I will talk a little bit about. Okay. So let's have a think. Don't worry, I won't put you in breakout rooms again. You can just type it in the chat. So let's have a think about this, right? When emotions escalate, what do we usually focus on, right? So you can just type in the chat and it will show up on the screen. So, for example, when I was in the school, one of the things that I would typically focus on is the crying. Oh, yes, you're right. The hitting also. You're right, Yamima. Sometimes we want to solve the problem because, it's a huge problem and it can cause emotions, big emotions. Okay. So yeah, these are really some of the things that we think about. We don't want to stop the crying. We want to resolve the issue. And very often what we end up doing is, we try and console the child, or we try and talk to the child, or we try and reason with the child. But that's usually not the point in time for reasoning, because just think about it. When we are upset, when we are stressed, and someone tries to talk to us and say, hey, it's not really like that, we're not necessarily going to listen to reason at that point in time, because we're too upset and too stressed, right? So that is not the time where we usually try and explain and try and resolve things. So think about how we typically focus on trying to change the behavior at that point in time. And that may not be the best time to change things. Okay. So, in that case, how do we help our children stay engaged with us? How do we help them connect with us? If we're not going to put in routines, if we're not going to prompt them, if we're not going to explain things to them, how can we help them stay connected and engaged? And this is where building resilience, building flexibility, and helping them regulate matters. Because when they are resilient, it means that whatever challenge comes their way, they can handle it. If they can be flexible, that means that they are capable of problem solving. They're not afraid of challenges because they can come up with a plan, and they may be able to come up with plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. Because when you know what to do, you don't feel as anxious, you don't feel as stressed. And when they can regulate their own emotions, they don't have to be afraid of feeling sad, feeling anger. I know for some of our kids, negative emotions, whether they are feeling it or whether other people are feeling it, can be hard. Because when other people are feeling it, I think you've seen some of our kids go, oh, mommy, smile, or teacher, smile. Don't be angry, be happy. So we see our kids doing that because they cannot handle the negative emotions. I remember working with one boy. I think he was probably about 12 or 13 at that time. And he was upset about something and he was about to cry, but he refused to feel that emotion. He actually tilted his head up to try and stop the tears from coming down. And there was once we were watching the movie Inside Out, and I was asking them, what's the value of sadness? Because I wanted them to understand that even sadness has a place and there's value in it. He was so angry with me and he was so upset. He kept saying, there's no value. There's no value in sadness. It's not a good emotion. So he couldn't even deal with just thinking about sadness. It was something that just overwhelmed him. All right. So you must be wondering, why are you all being asked to go to breakout rooms and do discussion? Why are we asked to do that reflection? The reason is we want to make that shift. To shift from thinking about just the behavior, thinking about resolving certain things, into thinking in a more developmental manner, thinking about the underlying processes. So that is why I've asked you to do all those things. So now that you've done that, let's talk a little bit about RDI and some of the terms that RDI uses, or some of the approaches that we use. So guided participation, that is a key part of RDI. It's when we empower the guides, which in most cases is the parents. We empower the guides so that they can mindfully guide their child. And that's the role of the professional. The professional does not just work with the child, we work with the whole family. Because, let's face it, therapy once a week is good, but it can only do so much. But when a parent is empowered and they know how to guide their child, that child is going to develop so much more. I'll give you something that we always say to parents. When parents learn how to integrate goals and how to help the kids work on it day to day, or with day-to-day experiences, whether they are packing a bag, whether they're taking a walk, whether they are helping with food preparation, you will find that there will be many opportunities spread throughout the day that the child will be working on that goal. So can you imagine, even if it's just 2 to 3 minutes a few times a day, when you spread it out, how much time would you have worked on with that child on his goals throughout an entire week? It's a lot of time. And also a lot of parents, when they first get that diagnosis, they feel like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to support my child. I don't know how to help my child. And what we want to do is we want to give parents back the ability to guide, to support that child, to feel that they can guide their child and they can parent their child. So that's the purpose of guided participation. It's a very powerful tool that we use to support families. And the next thing that we learn is co-regulation. When a child is able to co-regulate with us, to collaborate, to cooperate with us, that is the first step that we work on to work towards self-regulation eventually, and emotional regulation. Because when that child is able to co-regulate and cooperate, then they'll be able to manage their own emotions, because that's the goal, right? We don't want to have to always manage their behavior, because remember, every time we have to manage their behavior, we're firefighting all the time and it's exhausting. But when we can co-regulate with them, and when the child is able to co-regulate with us, eventually they'll learn to self-regulate. I'll give you an example. For many of our kids, we use walking as a form of co-regulation, because we know that movement can shift the emotion part of the brain. It helps the brain become more regulated, it helps the body become more regulated, and as a consequence, emotionally, they're also more regulated. So we walk with our kids a lot. And there was one boy, he was given a worksheet by the teacher, and he was very stressed out with the worksheet, probably because it was quite a challenging worksheet. So what he did was he asked his teacher for permission to go to the toilet. So for a lot of us, we will think, oh, okay, he's trying to avoid, he doesn't want to do the work. But because this child had worked on co-regulation with his mom, what he did was he walked to the toilet, the walking helped him regulate. And then after that, he came back and he actually did the worksheet, because he learned to self-regulate. After learning to co-regulate with his mother, he knew how to self-regulate his own emotions, his stress, such that he could then come back and participate. The next area that we often look at is dynamic thinking. Because if a child is capable of thinking in a creative manner, in a flexible manner, it means that mentally they're not stuck. The reason why a lot of our kids like routines or need routines, or why they're stuck in certain things, is because they don't have the ability as yet, or they're not proficient at it in terms of being able to think in a creative and flexible manner. And that's what makes them feel stuck. So I'll give you another example. I was working with this one young man. So I work with kids as young as 2 plus, to young adults as old as 20 plus. So this young man, I know some of you all are joining us from other countries. This young man, he was about to go into national service in Singapore. And so his grandmother was very worried. So about a few months before he was going into national service, they brought him to come and consult with me. I was like, oh my gosh, there's not much time. But anyway, we worked on his dynamic thinking. So there was one day after he started army, I think he was a few weeks in, his supervisor was giving him a hard time. And he told me, okay, Auntie Jen, I'm going to complain to the superiors about her. And in my heart, I was thinking, oh my gosh, please don't do that. You're going to get yourself into so much trouble, But I can't tell him that, because he's a young man. If you just tell him what to do, what not to do, he's not going to take it. So I asked him, okay, well, what do you think is going to happen when you go and complain? So he said, well, she will get in trouble and then she will know that next time she cannot bully me like that. I'm like, okay, yes, that's one possibility. What other possibilities might there be? Then he said that, oh, the superiors will know that she's not good and she's bad at her work. I'm like, okay, that's another possibility. I said, what is a possibility that might happen where she won't get in trouble? So then he thought about it for quite a while, and he said, oh, maybe I might get in trouble. I'm like, oh, yeah. Yeah, maybe you might get in trouble, right? Um, so then at the end of the day, thankfully, he decided that, yeah, he shouldn't complain. He wasn't going to get in trouble. And that's the thing about dynamic thinking. He didn't stay stuck. If he had stayed stuck, he would have gone to complain and he would have gone to get himself in trouble. So that's what we want. We don't want our kids to be stuck. We want them to be flexible. We don't want them to always have to follow a certain routine because they can't be flexible. So that's where dynamic thinking comes in. And development takes time. Because when you're talking about not just skills, not just behavior, when you're talking about real development, real fundamental change, that takes time because the brain takes time to develop. I think some of us already know that the prefrontal cortex, that's the front part of the brain that's responsible for a lot of higher order thinking, like the ability to empathize, hypothesize, that part of the brain doesn't actually fully mature until the mid-20s or later. So if typical development takes time, then we should not expect our kids to like, oh, hurry up, develop. So we have to be aware that development will take time. So let's have a look at an example of what co-regulation looks like.
No, Florence. Hey, let's see. It says Narita Tokyo. That looks good to me. Shucks. This.
All right. So this is a simple example of co-regulation. This is by no means the only kind of co-regulation that we do. But in this simple example of co-regulation, what you see first and foremost is you see the family using a day-to-day opportunity. Father happened to be flying off for a business trip, so he decided, okay, let's work on his goal whilst packing the luggage for me. And the child learns to be flexible, where you heard him say, oh, that looks good to me. But when dad sort of like disagrees, he has to be flexible enough to be able to, be willing to come up with a different way of doing it, a different place to put it. So that is what co-regulation can look like. So with RDI, first and foremost, the relationship is where we all start. All right. We have to build a relationship with the child. The child has to feel that they can trust us. That we will understand them. We're not just going to look at their behavior and judge them for what it is, but we're trying to understand what is the underlying thing. What is it that that behavior is trying to communicate to us? Is it trying to tell us I'm frustrated? Is it trying to tell us I feel really uncomfortable? Is it trying to tell us I cannot cope? It's just too hard for me. What is that behavior trying to tell us? Right? So this is from our podcast, but I've I think it's a nice one where mom actually talks about relationship.
And the interesting thing was that despite him choosing not to stay within the campus grounds, people just come to his place and they had their own group. And I thought this is so amazing for someone who was diagnosed with autism within 20 minutes in the doctor's clinic. He now has so many fans, like a group of 20 over people from church came to send him off for exchange to pray for him. I didn't know it's that popular.
All right. So the first relationship is usually with the family. And then from that first relationship, when they are able to build a relationship, they will then be able to build those relationships with others as well. And parents are the guides, and the professionals are the ones that support the parents in their guiding process. Sorry, I'm not sure why that one is not playing. Okay, but anyway, if you wanted to see more of the video, the full video, it's available for free on our YouTube channel. It's under our podcast, Shared Steps. Okay, so with RDI, what we do is it's not really it's not a program per se. We are looking at the processes. There's no like, oh, okay, we have to do A and then we have to do B, we have to do C. No, we look at where the child is developmentally. We try and understand what the child's needs are, and then what are the processes that needs to be worked on. And that's how we work on it. So for parents, the professionals will support you, help you figure out, okay, developmentally, what is missing, what are the processes that needs to be worked on. For professionals, the goal is to figure out and to learn how you're going to support parents. You have to know development through the lifespan very well in order to figure out, okay, what is developmentally appropriate? What are the processes that we need to work on? And that is how RDI is run. So I'll give you an example of how we support families and how we guide families to take on the ability to observe, the ability to reflect and to analyze and to look at things developmentally. So in this example, this was actually submitted to me just end of last year, where mom was writing about a video clip that she did and she submitted to me for me to observe and to give her feedback. But along with her submission, this is what she wrote. While coloring with Lily, I chose a color she didn't like. She got upset and tried to fix it. So this might sound familiar to some of us. And I kept changing it. I stayed quiet, showing disappointment. And later, when I tried to comb her hair, she screamed. It escalated into a meltdown. Looking back, I realized a few things. One, it was late in the day. We were both tired. She might not have been ready to take turns. Two, choosing black in her section made it hard for her to accept. Three, my own emotions probably made it harder for her to regulate because mom acknowledged that she was also struggling emotionally. And finally, I could have paused before combing her hair and given her a heads up. So when parents are empowered to be able to see things differently, to be able to approach things differently, they become more and more mindful in how they guide, and they become very efficient in terms of guiding their kids. So this is also available on our podcast, but I thought you might like to hear from one of our kids who has gone through the RDI program.
It will be a long process, but there's no rush. I think one of the best things that my mom has said that she took away from the whole process was patience and learning to take things slower, and I think also like what JJ said, also to appreciate the small successes. Sometimes it's not really about the outcome, but also about how you get there. And I think that's why RDI also takes care of that by ensuring that the process, the vehicle by which you get there, which is the relationship, stays intact and stays strong.
Okay. So it's not something fast, because what we're working on is we're literally working on the mental processes, helping a child be able to think in a dynamic way, to be able to cope with unpredictability. It's not just working on behavior. Behavior is just the surface. We have to understand what that behavior is trying to tell us and work on the underlying processes. So, and we try and do this by integrating into day-to-day opportunities. And that's how RDI, we don't just sit down for half an hour, and we do RDI. We integrate it into our lives so that it makes sense and it's authentic and it's real. All right. So today, what this is just an introduction. It's an orientation to get your head around, okay, what RDI is, what is its potential? And we've seen so many of our kids. I've been doing RDI. I've been working in this field for 30 years, but I've been doing RDI for 20 years. And what I've seen with our kids that have gone through RDI and how they've grown up is really, amazing. I'll give you another example of a story. This mom, she had 3 sons. Okay, 2 of her sons have autism. And so the 2 boys did RDI with me. The youngest son does not have autism. So of course he didn't do RDI. And unfortunately, last year, their house caught on fire and everything burnt, right? And what happened was that the older son was away, but the second son who did RDI, he actually coped with it so much better. He showed so much more resilience. He was able to, on his own, communicate with the university, because he's in university now, to communicate with the university, to apply for help with financing and all that, because everything burnt down. But the younger son, he told his mother, I don't want to do anything. I can't cope with anything. I can't deal with anything. And that's the amazing thing, it's resilience. It's not something we want happen. Fire is not something we want for any family or anyone, but it happened. And the one that showed the most resilient was the one that's on the spectrum. And that's the amazing part, that he was able to adapt and not just cope, whereas the other boy couldn't even cope. So what we're introducing tonight, like I said, is just an introduction. It's just an orientation to get you wondering, and hopefully you might be interested in finding out more. We have a lot of information, especially on our training website, RDI Southeast Asia. A lot of free information is there. We also have a lot of information on our social media channels. So find out as much information as you want, to try and see if this is a good fit for you. And for families who want to know, okay, and professionals, because this is for families, parents and professionals, who want to know, okay, where do I go from here if I really wanted a hands-on experience? If I wanted to see, okay, how do I actually work on what you're saying, on the guiding process, on building resilience, on helping my child be more flexible? We are organizing a 1-day workshop that's after Chinese New Year, towards the end of the month. It will be a small group because the goal is so that we can really work closely with families and with professionals. And for those of you who have joined us today, or whether you're watching from the recording, we have a promo code that's valid until the 6th of February. So use the promo code so that you can get an offer. It's even lower than the early bird pricing. All right. So this is an opportunity for you to have real hands-on experience if that's what you want. All right. For families who are wanting to get even more involved, you can choose to work with an RDI consultant or an RDI consultant in training. And we have consultants and consultants in training in Australia, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, New Zealand, and Singapore. So if you're interested, you can go to the rdiconnect.com to find out about consultants in the different countries. If you are having trouble reaching any consultant, let me know and I'll try and put you in touch with a consultant that's closest to your country. And for professionals who are interested in professional training, the next training starts on the 5th of March. It's once a week for 12 weeks. That is online, 2.5 hours for each session. And you can just scan the QR code and the registration will close on the 13th of February. All right. So one of the things I want you to take away from tonight is to remember that the goal of RDI is not about managing behavior. If you have to manage every single behavior that arises, you will be exhausted because you're going to be firefighting every single behavior that comes up. And if you have to manage every single behavior, we're also not fortune tellers. How are we going to predict what are some of the challenges that will come in our child's life? We can't. That's not possible. Okay. So the goal is to build the child's capacity to manage themselves in time. Okay. To self-regulate. Because when they can manage themselves, they can handle themselves. Then like that boy who got left behind in school on his first week, they will be able to cope. They will be able to handle the challenges, however unpredictable, however unexpected, they will be able to handle it when it comes their way. So we're going to open for Q&A. So if you all have any questions that you want to ask, feel free to type it in the chat. If there are questions that you are not sure you want to ask in the chat or in this format, you can scan this QR code. I have a Calendly link through that, and you can book a time to have a chat with me. The chat, there's no obligation, there's no charge for that. It's just to chat to address any questions that you might have. Okay? So if you have any questions in the meantime that you would like to type into chat, feel free to type it in. Okay, that's a good question. Currently, we don't have any RDI in Bangkok as yet. But we hope that in time to come that there will be consultants that will do training. I think one of the challenges, sometimes I'm not sure, maybe it's the language. Okay, any other questions? But if you are keen on working on RDI, even if you are in Bangkok, what you can do is RDI can be done at a distance as well. So you can get an RDI consultant that works with you over Zoom, for example. And we've done this even way back when we didn't even have Zoom and we were using what's that app that I was not an app, what's that program? I can't remember what's the program I was using long ago when I was consulting with families in Indonesia, and at that time there were no consultants in Indonesia. So it's possible to do it over Zoom. In fact, a lot of the consultants in the US and in China do it over Zoom. Yes, Hong Yin, thank you. It was Skype. That's right. So Skype wasn't as good. We had a lot of connection issues and all that. But now with Zoom, it's a lot better. So in big countries like China and the US, even Canada, it's very, very common to do it over Zoom. And I can tell you, even in Singapore, although we're a small country, I do have a few families that work with me over Zoom because although it doesn't take us long to travel from one end of Singapore to the other end, some families just say, I don't want to get dressed up. It's just easier. I can wear my home clothes and we'll do it over Zoom. Okay, are there any other questions that you have? How to measure the effectiveness or results of RDI other than examples that you mentioned about resilience of the second child? Is there any other indicator? Okay, so that comes in where we look at the goals and objectives. So a lot depends on the goals and objectives that we set out for your child. So for example, if let's say we're working on social referencing, then one of the things that we see is that the child starts to reference, and not just reference when we're working with the child. Once it's integrated, once it's part of who they are, it becomes almost like a habit. We will start to see it happening with other kids. Because unlike behavior, right, when we try to change a behavior, what happens is that we always have to worry, can this behavior generalize into other situations? But when you change the way a child thinks, when you change the way a child processes, then you don't have to worry about generalization, because once they have integrated that process, once they've changed the way they think and perceive certain things and process certain things, inevitably they'll do it with different people and in different situations, because you cannot suddenly switch off this process and say, okay, I'm not going to do this here. It's just not possible. So it's about getting it integrated and becoming a part of who they are. And like what the mom was sharing about her son, whose autism was so significant, like what she said, he was diagnosed within 20 minutes in the doctor's office. Because she built that relationship, she didn't teach him to go and make friends. The learning how to relate with friends, learning how to reference, learning how to engage with other people, it started to become a part of him, such that he very naturally went to make friends. In fact, by the time he was in secondary school, I remember mom used to say, oh my gosh, the complaints that she gets from school, the teachers are saying he's too sociable and he chit chat with everybody instead of focusing on his work. I mean, yeah, it's not good that he was chatting with everybody, but for us, to have a child that is on the spectrum, and to be someone who has so many friends, he can chit chat with everybody, it's like, wow, that is an achievement. So these are some of the ways that we see progress in terms of how our kids move. And if you're interested, whether you're a parent or a professional, if you're interested in looking at research, I also have a section in our RDI Southeast Asia website where I have listed down some research that have been done in the US, the UK, and Australia. Okay, do we have any other questions? Okay, if not, then whether you are joining us live today or whether you're watching the recording, thank you so much for joining us. And like I mentioned, if you have any questions that you want to schedule a private chat with me, feel free, just scan the QR code, book a time, and then we can talk more. All right. Thank you, everyone.